Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. Have you ever been told you're too deep, too intense, or that you think too much? If so, you're not broken. You're rare, and being rare means being misunderstood. Today, we're diving into 8 signs that you don't just think differently. You think at a level that 99% of people can't even begin to process. And no, it's not arrogance. It's awareness. Let's get into it. You ever walk into a room, catch a glance, hear a tone, and immediately know something's off? Before anyone says a word, before the situation unfolds, you already understand what's really happening. Most folks think you're overanalyzing, being too sensitive, or reading too much into things. But you're not. You're simply seeing what's already there. You pick up patterns like it's second nature. Emotional patterns, social patterns, behavioral loops. You notice the slight pause when someone answers a question. You hear what they didn't say just as loudly as what they did. While most people are reacting to the surface, what's visible, what's obvious, you're 2 steps deeper. Always. You don't try to be, you just that kind of perception doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from wiring from a mind that doesn't settle for what's shown. It searches for what's hidden. It connects things others don't even realize are connected. You remember how someone responded to a conversation 3 weeks ago and how it lines up perfectly with what they just said today? That's not coincidence. That's awareness. It's why people sometimes misunderstand you. They think you're being difficult or dramatic, when in reality you're just very ahead. You're picking up on dynamics, shifts, and energy changes they haven't even processed yet. And that can be lonely because when you're seeing the full picture and others are still stuck in one corner of the frame, it's hard to explain what you see without sounding like you're making it up. You might find yourself editing your thoughts in real time, not because you're unsure, but because you've learned that when you speak too clearly about what you're noticing, it makes people uncomfortable. They don't want to know that you see the fear behind their confidence or the resentment behind their smile, but you do. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This can show up in all areas of life, your relationships, your work, your decisions. You don't just notice what's happening now. You anticipate what's going to happen. You see the trajectory, the ripple effect. You've probably predicted things that others thought were impossible until they happened exactly the way you said they would. And when that happens, people usually come back and say, "How did you know?" And if you're honest, you don't always have a clean answer. Because it's not one thing, it's 1,000 little things. Your mind stitched together in silence. And that's what makes it hard to explain. Your brilliance isn't loud. It's subtle, quiet, internal, but it's relentless. People assume intelligence is about what you know, what degrees you hold, what vocabulary you use, but that's not your kind of smart. Your mind operates on insight, not just information. You feel your way to truth. You absorb, sense, connect, and interpret while others are stuck asking, "What does this mean?" You already know, but here's the thing. Living this way can be exhausting because constantly noticing things most people miss means you're rarely mentally off duty. You carry conversations long after they've ended. You replay moments because you sense something in them that didn't sit right. And even when you try to let it go, your brain loops back, not out of anxiety, but out of clarity seeking. You need to understand, you need to know where the pieces fit. Because if they don't, your mind keeps searching until they do. That depth of perception, it's a gift, but it's also weight. Not everyone's going to get it. And that's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to see what others can't and do something meaningful with it. Because when you see more, you're responsible for more. Not for fixing everyone, not for caring at all, but for staying grounded in the truth that your mind is not too much. It's just built differently, and different isn't a flaw. It's the point. You know what separates someone who just thinks a lot from someone who thinks deeply? It's the willingness to question everything, not just the world around them, but their own mind, their own beliefs, their own habits, reactions, assumptions. It's not just about having opinions. It's about holding those opinions up to the light and asking, why do I believe this? And as it's still true, most people avoid that kind of thinking because it's uncomfortable. It requires you to sit with uncertainty, to admit you don't have all the answers, even about yourself. But for you, that process is constant. You don't take anything at face value. You want to understand the why behind the what. Not because you're skeptical, but because surface level answers never feel like enough. You might hear something that everyone else nods along to, and instead of accepting it, your mind starts pulling at the thread. Where did that idea come from? Who benefits from it? What are we not seeing here? That might sound exhausting to someone else, but for you, it's instinct. It's how you make sense of the world. And it's not just external. You do it internally too. You don't give yourself a pass just because the thought came from you. You interrogate your own motives. You revisit past decisions, not to dwell, but to learn. You replay conversations, not to punish yourself, but to refine your awareness. You challenge your own thinking, your own growth, even your own healing. And while that kind of self-awareness is powerful, it's also lonely, because here's the truth. Not everyone wants to go there. Not everyone is willing to ask those questions. And when you do, you might find yourself feeling disconnected, like you're living in a deeper layer of reality that few people are even aware exists. You start noticing how much of the world runs on autopilot, how often people repeat things they've never examined, believe things they've never challenged. And it's not about judgment, it's about contrast. You see it because you can't not see it. You're probably the one who pauses before reacting, who sits with the discomfort of not knowing, who resists easy answers because you know they usually come with hidden costs. And while others might see that as indecision, it's actually maturity. You've learned that rushing to conclusions feels good in the short term, but truth takes time and you're willing to wait for it. You're willing to wrestle with it. You're willing to let it change you. And that right there is rare. Most people are looking for validation. You're looking for transformation. You're not asking questions just to sound smart. You're doing it to grow, to evolve, to move towards something more grounded, more honest, more real. And that's hard to explain to people who live in the shallow end of the pool. You're swimming in the deep, and they can't see the pressure you're under. You've probably been misunderstood because of that. It's labeled as too intense, too philosophical, too much. But that's because most people mistake depth for difficulty. When someone isn't used to examining their own beliefs, someone who does will always feel threatening. But that doesn't mean you should shrink or soften or stop asking hard questions. Because that kind of mind, the one that questions itself, is a mind that can't be manipulated. It's not easily swayed by trends or noise. It doesn't need the approval of the crowd to feel grounded. It's already rooted. It already knows where it stands because it earned that clarity through wrestling, not pretending. You think differently. You have processed differently. And yeah, it sets you apart. But that separation isn't a curse. It's clarity. You see things for what they are. And more importantly, you're not afraid to see yourself for what you are, flaws and all. And that kind of truth-telling, that kind of mental honesty, that's a strength most people will never have the courage to touch. There's a unique tension you carry when you both feel deeply and think deeply. Most people have one or the other. They're emotional, but they can't explain why, or they're analytical, but disconnected from their own heart. You've got both running full force, and that's not an easy combination to carry because when you feel deeply, you absorb the world in ways others don't even notice. A look, a tone, the energy in a room, it all hits you harder, not just emotionally, but intellectually. You don't just feel something is off, you analyze why it feels off, you break it down, you reflect, you internalize, and that loop between your head and your heart, it never really shuts off. Someone says something in passing and it lingers with you, not because you're sensitive, but because your mind locks onto the emotional weight behind the words. You hear the hurt they're trying to hide. You catch the hesitation in their voice. And while others move on, you're still there sorting through what it meant, why it hit you, and what it says about them or you. This level of depth creates a kind of inner intensity that's hard to explain. Because when your thoughts and feelings are both tuned up that high, everything becomes layered. You're not just experiencing life, you're interpreting it constantly. You're in a conversation while also noticing the power dynamics. You're giving advice while silently examining your own contradictions. You're comforting someone while trying to process what it stirs up in you all at once. It's exhausting, not in a dramatic way, just in a constant, quiet way, like background noise you've learned to live with. You don't ever notice. You don't ever truly disengage. And the hardest part, most people will never see that side of you. They'll never know how much internal work happens behind every decision, every interaction, every pause before you speak, because you don't just react, you respond. You consider the ripple effect. You weigh not just your own emotions, but how they might affect others. You think before you speak, not because you're afraid, but because you have care, because you know your words carry weight and you feel the responsibility that comes with that. Sometimes you wish you could shut it off, just feel without thinking or think without feeling. But that's not how you're built. Your mind and your emotions are connected like a circuit. One fuels the other, and it's what makes you powerful, but also misunderstood because you're not easy to categorize. You're not just smart or emotional, you're both. And people aren't used to that. They might tell you to stop overthinking or to not take things so personally. But what they don't realize is that you're not trying to overthink. You're not trying to feel so deeply. That's just your baseline. That's where you live. And when you try to dull it down, you end up feeling less like yourself. You disconnect from the very things that make you valuable. Because that depth you carry, it's not a liability, it's insight. It allows you to see things others can't, to understand people in ways they don't even understand themselves, to offer empathy that's not shallow or scripted, but rooted in real awareness. And that's rare. That's needed. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it makes relationships more complicated. Yes, it sometimes makes you question your own sanity, how you can feel so much and still break it all down with such clarity. But don't let the world convince you to simplify what was never meant to be simple. Your depth is not a problem to fix. It's a strength to learn how to carry. You think deeply and you feel deeply. And that's exactly why your mind is one most people won't fully understand. You ever feel like your best thinking happens when the world goes quiet? Not when you're surrounded by people, not when you're trying to keep up with the pace of everything around you, but in those quiet, in-between moments when it's just you, your thoughts, and silence. That's not by accident. That's how your mind works. You don't crave solitude because you're trying to escape people. You crave it because it's the only space where your mind has enough room to stretch out and breathe. See, people often mistake solitude for isolation. They think you're pulling away, shutting down. But in truth, you're tuning in. You're making space to process everything that's constantly running through your head. And it's not just about decompressing, it's about clarity, because when you're around others, you're not just present. You're as reading. You're observing energy, tracking body language, listening to words, and what's underneath them. You're absorbing, and that takes a toll. So when you step away, it's not retreat, it's recalibration. It's where your mind gets to lay everything out. Look at the puzzle pieces and finally see the whole picture without interruption. You replay conversations. You dissect situations. You sort through the noise, and that's how you arrive at insight. Not by rushing, not by reacting, but by reflecting. And the thing is, you don't choose to do this. It chooses you. Your brain just goes, it runs patterns, builds connections, rewinds, and replays. It doesn't shut off just because the world around you is moving fast. In fact, the faster the world spins, the more you need to step away to catch your breath, to make sense of what most people gloss over. But here's where it gets tricky. Most people don't understand that. They take your silence personally. They think your distance means disinterest, that your quiet is some kind of wall, but it's not. It's a filter, a reset, a way for you to get back to yourself so that when you do come back, you're actually present, actually grounded, actually there. You've probably tried to explain this to maybe to a partner, a friend, a coworker. You try to say, I just need a little space to think, and it gets interpreted as cold or detached. But it's not that you don't care. It's that you care so much. Your mind needs more time to carry the weight of it all. And that kind of internal processing isn't something you can rush or fake. There's a depth to how you think that doesn't mix well with constant noise. Small talk drains you. Surface level conversations wear you down. You're not wired for quick and casual. You're wired for real and meaningful. And real conversations require real energy, something you can only refill in solitude. And this is where people often miss it. They think the smartest minds are always talking, always in the room, always engaging. But some of the deepest minds are the quietest ones. Not because they don't have anything to say, but because they're busy listening and noticing, digesting. They're thinking 5 layers deep before they speak a single word. And when they finally do speak, it's never noise, it's truth. That's how you operate. And that's why being alone doesn't scare you. It grounds you. It helps you tune into your own voice again, especially when the world has been too loud for too long. It gives you space to untangle what you've picked up from others, to ask yourself what's actually mine. Because when you feel everything and think through everything, the lines can blur, and solitude helps you find yourself again in the mix. So don't apologize for needing space. Don't shrink from the silence that makes other people uncomfortable. You're not avoiding connection. You're protecting the clarity that makes connection possible. And when you re-enter the world from that place of calm, people don't always know what changed, but they feel it. Because when your mind has room to breathe, your presence hits different. Have you ever had something so clear in your mind, an idea, a feeling, a realization, and the moment you tried to explain it out loud, it just didn't come out right? You stumble, backtrack, simplify, and the person listening nods politely, maybe even agrees with you. But you can tell they don't get it. Not really. They heard your words, but they didn't hear your meaning. And you're left sitting there thinking, that's not what I meant at all. That's what happens when your mind moves in dimensions. Most people don't travel when your thoughts are layered, nuanced, and textured. But the language we use in everyday life just isn't built to carry that kind of weight. It's like trying to explain a dream in black and white when you saw it in full color, sound, and movement. You felt it, you understood it. But when it's time to translate it into words, something gets lost. And it's frustrating, isn't it? Because you're not trying to be vague or mysterious. You're trying to finish air. You're trying to bring someone inside the way you see the world. But the complexity of your thoughts doesn't always fit into a conversation-sized containers. You're thinking in systems and context and emotion and cause and effect, and sometimes all at once. You're tracking invisible threads, sensing what's unspoken, connecting the now to the later, the seen to the unseen. And when someone asks, "What's wrong?" or "What do you mean?" you pause. Not because you don't know, but because you're trying to find a version of the truth they can actually hold. And that's the hardest part. You do know. You just don't always know how to say it in a way that lands right. Because what's clear to you feels blurry to them. What's obvious to you sounds like overthinking to them. So sometimes you just stay quiet. You nod. You give the shortened version, the safe version. And afterward, you sit with the unspoken, with the parts of you that didn't make it into the sentence, with the truth that had to be trimmed down just to be palatable. That kind of experience of being unable to fully express what's inside you is one of the most isolating things about having a mind. Most people can't understand. It's not that you're smarter. It's that your thoughts are layered in ways that language can't always keep up with. You're thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead in a conversation while still holding empathy for where the other person is emotionally. You're interpreting not just what was said, but why it was said, what was meant by it, and how it lines up with everything else you've observed. And that mental multitasking doesn't always translate well out loud. You might even notice that your deepest realizations come in silence. You feel them fully in your body first. You sense the truth of something before you can explain it. And by the time you feel can explain it, the moment has passed, or the conversation has moved on, or the people you wanted to share it with are already looking at you like you're trying too hard. And that's when it hits. You're not too much. You're just speaking a language. Not everyone's fluent in a language built on intuition, intellect, emotion, and experience all woven together. And it's okay if not everyone speaks it back, because what you carry isn't meant to be simplified. It's meant to be understood deeply by the right people at the right time. So you learn to hold space for yourself, to honor the thoughts that don't always fit into words. You give yourself permission to know what you know even when others don't see it. And you begin to realize that your inability to explain something isn't a failure, it's proof of how expansive it really is. Because some truths are too big for language, some minds are too layered for shortcuts. And yours was never meant to fit into small talk. So if you've ever felt out of place, like your thoughts are too layered, your emotions too intense, your need for solitude misunderstood, or your insights constantly brushed off, know this. It's not because something is wrong with you. It's because your mind operates on a level most people don't even realize exists. You see more, feel more, question more, connect more, and that makes you different. But different isn't a weakness. It's a signal, a signpost, a reminder that your depth is not a burden. It's a gift. And no, not everyone will understand you, but that's not the goal. The goal is to understand yourself, to stop shrinking, diluting, or explaining away what makes you rare. You weren't built for the surface. You were made for the deep. And people may not get that, but you do. And that's enough.